there was X Factor. There was another one that was like a 2-a-day type thing.
Do you think that's good? Do you think it's good for kids
So
to train?
when I think about it now, and I'm relating it to karate, before I knew anything about training, the kids would be doing something. These older kids did something, but a little different. These older kids did something, but a little bit different than the adult classes did. We never did weight training, but they did a lot more in terms of the different resistance stuff. But like at the younger levels, like they were standing on one leg. They were doing planks, push-ups, sit-ups, jump rope, handstands, cartwheels, kicking, holding your leg out. There was just a lot of functional stabilization things that we were doing to 5, 6, 7-year-olds, right? And it was a game. It was fun. X Factor and those 2-a-day programs, I remember, like, it was all body weight. We did some weight training. There was like, all right, weight session. It was very basic, very basic for middle school kids, right? Like little bench presses, little dumbbell curls. But it was all just agility, speed, box jumps, burpees, mountain climbers,
explosive
holding
power,
squats and jumping, like resistance training in its own respects to what we needed. Nowadays, I feel like I see a lot of kids, younger kids pumping iron like super early.
Oh yeah. Well, there used to be such a big stigma around that, where when you're a younger kid around 9, 10 years old, they're like, oh no, you shouldn't be lifting weights because you're going to stunt your growth. And the thinking behind that was that you would damage your growth plates. And so here's the truth.
That's what happened to me. Exactly.
There is some truth behind the myth, right? So when your body's developing as a child, you have these growth plates that allow you for your body to mature. And if those growth plates get damaged, then it can stunt the growth. It can stop the different bones from growing. So much so that if you break a growth plate in your right arm, sorry, this is your right arm. I'm a fitness professional. If you break a growth plate in your right arm, this one will stop growing and this one will keep growing. And you can have different size limbs.
You have to do that when you're teaching class.
Oh yeah, when you do the mirror.
This is your right arm.
Yeah. So that's and that is true. And the thinking was that, well, if you lift weights, you're going to damage those growth plates, and that's just not true. Yeah. If you are safe and you have a good resistance training program for these kids, and they're not doing a ton of weight, because kids don't need to do a ton of weight. Yeah. They need to do very, very light weight and learn the technique, learn the form, learn how to do it safely. And you can start them as early as you'd like if you come at it from that mindset. And that is weightlifting. It's just really, really light, really, really safe, controlled. And that'll keep them safe and keep them from hurting those plates, and they'll be fine. They'll be just fine.
I think it all depends too on the comfortability of the parent, the trainer, the coach, or whoever's dealing with that younger population.
Find a professional.
You have to know, and you have to know what it is that you're looking for. So when you see that professional go to work, you feel comfortable being like, hey, I want my child or whatever to do this because I know that this is best for them based on this research that I've done or whatever. You can, I don't know. There's a lot of approaches for it, but I think the younger population, it has a bad stigma against like exercise and like versus play and like.
Did I tell you where that came from?
What?
Where that stigma, a lot of that stigma arises from. Mm-hmm. So it comes from a couple different sources, but there was one study back in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. It was a study of in Japan of these kids who had different growth rates, right? So there was a group of kids that were stunted in their growth, and there was a group of kids that were not. And the group of kids that were stunted were all laborers. They would work in the fields with their families, and they were all really, really poor. And so the idea or the conclusion that they came to was because these kids were working so hard and throwing these bells and doing resistance training when they were lifting weights essentially. Because of that, it stunted their growth. Well, that's since been looked at and peer reviewed and debunked. And what actually happened was that these kids were malnourished.
Yeah.
So they came up in a poor area, and they couldn't feed. They didn't have a whole lot of access to protein, whereas these other kids were really well fed. So these other kids grew like crazy, and these other little kids who didn't have the proper nourishment didn't, and that's where the discrepancy came from. Yeah. Your kids can resistance train and do all the as long as it's safe and you feed them well, then their growth will be just fine.
That's what I was saying. But you got to know when I was saying you got to know what you're looking for. Before teaching class, before doing squats, I'm like, and most of them have heard it already 100 million times. I'm like, all right, everybody's body's different, so everybody's squat's going to be a little different. So let me show you how to squat. And this is the only way. So like I'll say stupid stuff like that. So you got to know what you're looking for when if I have friends whose parents were like, they're going to be a professional, like they're going to go and do this.
Right.
Whether it's because they were professional or not, or that was their desire, or the kid wanted to, whatever the case may be.
Right.
It's a whole nother story. But like, some of them, they were in the game so young.
Yeah.
Like I didn't play Pee Wee football, but a lot of the friends I played with who did play Pee Wee football had been lifting weights since they were little kids, like 8, 9, 10. I started when I was like 13, 14.
Oh God, dude.
Still really young.
I didn't start like seriously weightlifting until I was already out of college. I must have been like,
Really?
Yeah, I was already in my 20s.
It's so weak, bro.
Yep. I lost a lot of time. I was doing other stuff.
I was the laborer. I was malnourished, just killing it, and I ended up shorter, I think, is what happened.